But Michelle, you mentioned getting scrambled against some bears. Can you maybe talk a bit about that? Because they sound really interesting. Share that with our viewers.
I'll try to stay away from the classified part. So basically, we held
Okay.
alerts for a variety of things in Bagotville, and one of them was the bear, and we'd be notified that we had an intercept time out there, so we'd launch out of Bagotville, go to the East Coast, refuel, and then we'd launch at the appropriate time to get out there about the time that the bears would be transiting our area of operation. The intercepts were actually quite interesting. First of all, it's the middle of the Cold War. They're Cold Warriors that we think are 10 feet tall. They're flying a propeller-driven airplane that can go as fast as our airplane, which is kind of interesting. And then when you pull up to them, we're over the North Atlantic. Even in the summer, life expectancy isn't very long. In the winter, it's very short. So these guys are leaving Russia on their way to Cuba, where there's rum, cigars, and women. They have no interest in messing with us, and we're 300 miles off the coast of Newfoundland. We have no interest in going for a swim either. So it was typically very friendly. We'd pull up on the wing. We'd take pictures of them. They'd take pictures of us. Yeah, there was the standard wave. Sometimes a Playboy or a Coca-Cola bottle would show up, and then we'd head back. Just let him know that we had the capability to go out there, and we were armed. And it's just a friendly hi, how are you? What's very interesting is fast forward to 2003. I'm on my squadron as a squadron commander in Winnipeg in the C-130 squadron, and I get tasked with a crew to go over and do open skies missions 1 week in Ukraine and 1 week in Russia. And when we end up in Russia, we end up having a lunch, our entire crew, with a Russian fighter pilot, a Russian bomber pilot, a Russian tanker pilot. So me and the bomber pilot, we're sitting next to each other, and we start talking through a young lieutenant who spoke Russian and English about when were you flying bombers and so on. And we figured we may have met over the North Atlantic 30 years before or 20 years before then when we were flying. So it's kind of cool. Small world.
Absolutely. And what missiles or like ammunition would you be carrying on these like scrambles for bears?
So the Voodoo carried two weapons. It carried the Genie, which was a nuclear tipped, unguided. So you're just firing a nuclear bullet forward, and you're hoping that it explodes over or near the bomber. And it's not the flash. The flash will blind the pilots, but it's the overpressure from the explosion that will literally snap the wings off the bomber. The other one we carried there were two Genies and there were two AIM-4D Falcon heat-seeking missiles, and those went together because they were literally first-generation infrared missiles, and had a PK that was well less than 100%. It was in the 60s, 70s, I think. I can't remember. You can probably find it on the internet. So these things would go off together. The only time we ever fired the weapons was when we were down in Tyndall doing missile qualifications, and we were firing time expired missiles. The Genie didn't care. It was non-guided, so it went out and did its thing. And it was like a train leaving the airplane, the one I fired. And the infrared missiles were normally, the first one would go dumb. It had a bad seeker head. And the second one would lock onto the first one and follow it into the water. So that's the nature of the beast. Reality is non-time expired missiles would probably work just fine as infrared and find the target.
Mhm. And I've always
And that's
been
all we had.
fascinated.
No gun.
Yeah, so you heard right. So I've always been fascinated with this as well. Before we move on, Michelle, did you ever like contact them via radio when you're like formatting on the bears?
Um, my four missions, we did not. We did have one pilot on our squadron that was fluent in Polish, and Polish and Russian is close. So he kind of studied a couple of Russian lines to just say hello and a couple of things, and they never answered. We don't even know if they were monitoring the, like we were on our frequencies, but he went on guard and tried communicating with them on guard and never got a response. So.